Yeah,
in
yeah,
this question.
yeah. Mhm.
So are you Indian or Pakistani?
My parents are from Sri Lanka, which is right
Okay.
under India.
Right under India. Okay.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of men from that part of the world, a
Oh,
lot of
really?
Indian men in the US, Canada, Europe, and a lot of Pakistanis as well. Um, and so I've heard pretty similar stories of what it's like to grow up in that culture. Um, so that dynamic I was talking to you about of when we were our children and we start internalizing this belief that I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. I cause these things. The word that is usually applied for that internalized belief, and it's an emotional belief, not so much an intellectual belief, because our intellectual brain isn't that online when we start internalizing it, but our emotional brain is. What we call that is toxic shame. And toxic shame is not a sense that I do bad things, but it is I am bad. I am fundamentally bad. I'm inherently bad. You know, I'm unlovable. I'm not good enough. Now, those are usually we don't have words attached to that. It's an emotional state because that gets stored up in a real primitive part of our brain down here in the brainstem called the amygdala that stores emotional memory. That's fully online at birth. Now, as we grow up and begin to be able to process the world around us and make a little bit more conscious um, decisions about it, rational. I mean, by the time a child's hitting 3, 4, 5 years old, you can actually start to have kind of rational conversations with them, and they can be very entertaining and very rational and creative. So as we get older, what then happens is we start layering our life experiences on top of that internalized belief. So that internalized belief that I'm not good enough, I'm bad, I'm unlovable, it's like our machine language. It's what used to be the DOS of like Microsoft Windows. It's what runs all the apps on top. So that what we layer on top is, oh, I got spanked. That's proof I'm not bad. Or mommy and daddy got divorced. That's proof I'm bad. I got yelled at. That's proof that I'm bad. The kids teased me. That's proof I'm bad. I got bullied. That's proof that I'm bad. A girl teased me, or a girl didn't want to be my girlfriend. That's proof that I'm bad. So all of our life experience just keep getting layered on top of that emotional belief. And then especially, so let's talk, we'll bring it back to sexuality. One of the things I like to do in my workshops where I have a group of people is that I'll ask them the question, or I'll say, think back to your earliest sexual memory, for good or for bad. Maybe it was a pleasant sexual memory. Maybe it was your first kiss. Maybe it was your first notice you had an erection. Maybe it's your first wet dream. Maybe it was your first, I'll show you mine, you show me yours. Maybe it was being violated. Maybe it was trauma. But think back to your first sexual experience. And I'll have all the people, okay, get that in your mind. And you can do that t's Think of what's the first one that comes to mind, whatever. Oh, you got a smile on your face.
It's a funny
All
one.
right. It's a funny one. But here's what I ask people though. In the event of that sexual experience, was it something you could talk about, that you could go share about, that you could go tell your family about, tell your parents about? And if you shared it with your parents, did they say, that's amazing. That's an important developmental milestone. Let's go get pizza and celebrate that sexual experience you had? No,
Probably
that
not.
didn't happen. No. Or I say, was it shame based? Was it hidden? Was there guilt associated with it? Was there fear? Was there fear of getting caught? Was there, someone told you you better not ever tell anybody? And what's even more significant, did it feel good while feeling bad at the same time? Did you feel pleasure, but yet felt guilt or shame? I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm going to get scolded, or I'm going to get spanked, or I'm going to go to hell. And 99.9% of the people, they laugh at yeah, yeah, of course, it was hidden. It was in the dark. It was secret. It was shame based. So then what happens? not only do we have these early internal beliefs that I'm not good enough, I'm bad, sex gets layered on top of that. "Oh, I did this bad thing, or this bad thing happened to me, or I'm a bad person because I like this, or I keep doing it again, or I keep letting the person do it to me again, or I keep seeking it out, or I keep looking at daddy's magazine I found, or I keep going back on the internet." So all of this keeps piling up shame associated with sexuality. Sexuality gets cross-wired with shame. Okay. So now we grow up to be adults, and that's the only way we really know how to do sex is to do it in a shame-based way. And especially if we grow up with culture or religion teaching us, at least to some degree, sex is bad, or evil or sinful in some form. And again, I grew up with that, sex is dirty, evil, sinful, save it for the one you love, save it for marriage, or you'll go to hell for all eternity if you don't save it for marriage. Okay, most of us don't save it for marriage. So that means we're going to crosswire even all that fear wrapped into it. Then on our wedding night, when we're supposed to get married, all of that conditioning and shame is supposed to just fall away and dissolve, and we go, "Hey honey, let's have sex." And we're going, well, probably you already were having sex before, the honeymoon anyway, but it doesn't just go away. And so what happens is we carry all this shame, sexual shame, into our adult relationships, and probably really gets magnified in adolescence when our sex drive is the strongest. So think about this: a boy's sex drive is the strongest, let's say 14 to 18, 16 to 22, somewhere in there, right? Depending on our when we matured and developed. And in most cultures, that is the time of life that a boy, a teenager, a young man is going to have the least possible sexual partners, least sexual availability. So think about it. Your hormones are raging 14, 16, 18, 20 years old. That's all your mind and body thinks about is sex. That's all your body wants to do is procreate. That's what it's designed to do. And that's the time in life for most boys where we have absolutely no sexual access, no available appropriate partner to it. So that means you've got to do something with all that sexual energy. And so, of course, for most boys, it goes towards fantasy, masturbation, nowadays towards pornography, online porn. When I was a kid, somebody found their dad's magazine underneath the mattress. Like, dads never thought their kids would look underneath their mattress. But every dad thought that's the best place to put it.
Hmm.
But that energy has to go somewhere, and usually in a hidden, repressed, secretive, shame-based kind of way. I mean, if you're a little boy, let's say you're 15, 14, 15 years old, and you're in your bedroom pleasuring yourself, and what if you hear footsteps coming? And what if mom or dad actually come in? And I've been told so many stories by people. Mom and dad did come in on them when they were masturbating, and they either got shamed or spanked or scolded or lectured, or they turned around, walked out, and never said a thing to them, which feels even worse. Uh-oh. When are they going to say something? They never do. So the majority of us reach adulthood with thick layers of shame and thick layers of sexual shame. And that's kind of the only way we know how to have sex. So whether our marriage was arranged for us, if we live in an Asian culture, whether, whether we start having sex in adolescence or in our 20s, whether we find the woman of our dreams, or whether however we're expressing our sexuality, rarely is it going to be in an open, transparent, loving, mutually supportive, mutually adventurous kind of way. I mean that happens sometimes, but for most people, it happens in these kind of dark, hidden, secretive, let's not talk too much about it kind of way. And I'll give you a quick example of how we're trained not to talk about this stuff. In my book, Dating Essentials for Men, I talk with men about having what I call the pre-sex talk. You've been dating a woman, it's gotten to the point, it's hot and heavy, clothes are about to come off, and I recommend that men pause and just say to the woman, "Okay, looks like clothes are about to come off. Let's have a quick talk." And talk about diseases, STDs, talk about unwanted pregnancy, talk about fertility, talk about protection, talk about what if we do have an unwanted pregnancy. And I've added to that for the man to ask the question, what does us having sex mean to you? That's kind of a consent question. Because if you ask a woman, what does us having sex together mean to you? That's implying we're going to have sex. And if she says what it means to her, that's her way of consenting. Yeah, that's the direction we're going. So I have men, I strongly encourage them to have this conversation. Talk about, are we going to wear a condom? Does one of us have one? Does either of us have a sexually transmitted disease? Are we fertile? Could we risk, having a pregnancy here? And are we both consensual? And I'll say, and it's a real good idea not to do this while you're drinking or drunk, because that's not particularly consensual. You know what? Every guy I talk to about doing this goes, "Oh, I'm afraid of doing that. What if she has a woman? What if she has a bad reaction? What if she goes off on me? What if it ruins the whole moment?" And I've had these talks, and I've never had it ruin the moment. In every case, the woman has said, "Thank you for having that conversation. No man has ever done that with me." The woman actually feels safer and more trusting and more ready to take her clothes off because she feels trust. She feels safe. She feels secure. But the majority of people, you say, just have a 3-minute conversation about wearing a condom, about what does this mean, that this thing we're about to do. And oh no, I got her just drunk enough. I don't want that buzz to wear off and her to back out. And it's not the right environment to have sex, but that's the way so many of us do it. And again, I've been a marriage therapist for 40 years. And it is amazing, yeah, how many couples in a relationship rarely talk about the depth of their sexuality, what their wants, what their desires are, what they like, what they don't like. We just kind of think we should be able to just do it and it should work out. And, maybe we shouldn't have to talk about it too much. Um, so, yeah, but again, we grow up in cultures where we're taught to be sexually repressed and then bombarded with sexual stimuli and then expected that all of this should work out just nice and easy. It doesn't. It's messy. It's complicated.
So it seems like the only way to really overcome that is to talk to somebody about it, like you call it a safe person, right?
Yeah,
And then just like reveal yourself, and if that person doesn't judge you, that genuinely should help, right?
it
Now,
does.
so can a guy talk to, let's say, something like a pet or maybe God or whatever, or does it have to be an actual human being? Because many people watching this are
Well,
gonna
let me say, we got Nala, my 4-year-old.
oh
pit
yeah,
bull
your
over
dog,
here.
yeah.
No, Nala, come here. Let's talk about sex. you know, um, yeah, here. I've never. Yeah, can I talk to my guinea pig about this?
Yeah.
Will my guinea pig help
Because
me
many
release
people
my
don't
sex?
like feel that comfort, when it comes, because like they don't really have many
That's the
close
point.
people, especially nowadays, right? Like loneliness is pretty rampant. You know what I'm saying?
It is.
So
That's a whole other subject
it
right there.
is.
But
Yeah.
that's the point, right? What you're basically saying, can I overcome my repression while staying repressed at the same time?
Not
Right?
possible.
Can I just keep this to myself? And so one of the things I tell people is that shame is we didn't develop shame in social isolation, and we're not going to overcome shame in social isolation.
Mm.
And even if you read the book, for example, or read other books on shame, and maybe give yourself some mantras, I'm good enough, I'm not bad, I'm lovable, maybe write in your journal. I mean, those can be very positive things, but we're still not letting anybody really know us. The thing about shame is it doesn't want to be vulnerable. It doesn't want to be seen. It doesn't want to be found out. And I know because I'll still watch various ways that my shame comes up. And most of the time I'm not even conscious that it's up. I just kind of push it away because I don't want to feel it. So I was really fortunate when I started my recovery, that I now call my recovery from nice guy syndrome. I didn't know what it was at that time. All I know is I had acted out. I'd sexually acted out in my second marriage, and my wife found out after the fact, after I'd already quit doing it, but she found out, and she was justifiably upset. And she said, everybody thinks you're a nice guy, but you're not. I can't trust you. You're passive aggressive. You have secrets, and I really did think I was a nice guy. And I thought, I'm such a nice guy, nobody should ever get mad at me because I'm a nice guy. And she said, I'm going to leave you if you don't go get help. Well, I didn't want her to leave me, even though our marriage was only 2 years old at that point, and really pretty much on the rocks from our the day we got married on. And but I didn't want it to end. It was my second marriage. I loved her. She was beautiful. I wanted it to work out. So she said, "You're a sex addict." And so I went to a 12-step group for sex addicts. Quickly found out I wasn't having enough sex to be a sex addict. But the beauty of it was all guys, all men. And in a 12-step group, you can share, and nobody gives they don't have what's called crosstalk. Nobody gives you advice, nobody tells you what to do. They just say, "Thank you for sharing." And then they share their story. And that's how you learn to relate. Oh, that, I don't think that guy's bad, so maybe I'm not bad either. So in this 12-step group for sex addicts, there were guys in there that probably had already been in jail or were on their way to jail for their sexual acting out. It's hardcore stuff.
Mm.
For the first time in my life, I started revealing things about me I'd never told anybody. Again, I grew up in a fundamental Christian church, had a critical, angry father. I grew up during the angry feminism of the 60s and 70s that said every man's a rapist, an erection's a sign of aggression, nothing like piling shame on. And even now, toxic
Yeah.
masculinity, all of that's just a heaping of shame on men. You're bad, you're bad, you're bad. And often you're bad because you want to have sex. So that it's just prominent in our society. So I go to this group, this 12-step group, and for the first time in my life, just started revealing things about me, things I've thought about, things I've done, dark impulses I've not acted on, but there's a dark impulse there. And the guys would just say, "Thank you for sharing, Robert." And then I'd go to my therapist and I'd tell her, things about me. And she'd go, "Well, let's just explore what that's about." And then later I joined a men's group that specifically dealt with sexual shame, led by a female therapist. And I was in that group for 5 or 6 years. That's when I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And so every time in a safe place, I could reveal something about me that I had shame about, that I was afraid I might get scolded, rejected, more shame. People think I'm bad. People walk out on me. And every time I share it and I just get a kind look or, thank you for sharing that, or I don't think you're bad. So one thing it does, it releases this stuff. It lets us be seen. It lets us be vulnerable. But a second thing it does is we get a more accurate interpretation of who we are. So like, if somebody comes to me in therapy and says, "Oh, my uncle touched me when I was 4 years old." And I go, "Well, that was abuse." And they go, "Well, but it felt good. I got an erection and then I didn't stop it and I didn't tell anybody and it went on for a number of years and I feel like I'm such a horrible person. I'm such a terrible person." I mean, that's not a shame you can release just by talking to your gerbil or, your guinea pig or, a glass of water. Because part of it is you have to tell it and have the experience of not getting re-shamed, not getting re-traumatized, re-abused, and to have somebody that you trust, whether it be a coach, a therapist, a men's group, a good friend, right? A minister, rabbi, to have somebody say, like, "No, you're not bad. That's not your fault." And yeah, that's a normal physiological response that your body would feel pleasure from it. But you're not bad because that happened to you, or that you think you let it happen again, or you didn't tell anybody. In fact, you were an innocent child. You get a more accurate storyline to start kind of putting into our nervous system. Now, it takes a while and it takes often a repeated, telling, sometimes just letting something go one time does almost magic, but it usually takes a lot of sharing. One example, I worked with a client, this is back when I was in Seattle, and this guy was African American, tall guy, and because he knew that a lot of people were afraid of big black men, he didn't walk real upright, he had a lot of shame, he tried to be a real nice guy, and he had a girlfriend that just treated him like shit, just treated him bad, put him through the ringer, scolded him, put him down, criticized him, and he came to a workshop with me. And in the workshop, we were talking about shame. And I already had worked with him some before this time, so I knew him. And in the workshop, we're talking about shame. And the guy kind of started to cry. And I said, "Tell me what's going on." And he said, "I just feel like I'm such a terrible person." And I go, "Why? Tell us why you feel like a terrible person. Give us a story. This proof that you're a terrible person." And he just started crying. And then he tells his story that, like, when he was 14, 15 years old, he stole a car stereo out of a neighbor's car. Dumb 14,
Yeah.
15-year-old stunt.
Yeah.
And he's telling this and just weeping. And the guys in the room, there's like 6, 7, 8 other guys in the room. We're all just looking at him, looks of compassion. And he looks up around, and I said, "Would you like feedback from the other men as to what they think about you right now?" He goes, "Okay." I mean, he's still crying.
Mm.
Every one of the guys says, "I don't think you're bad. I don't judge you. If that's the worst thing you ever did, you're a saint. I've done much worse. Let me tell you the dumb shit I did at 15." And, every man in the room basically said, "You're a real normal human being, and that's normal 15-year-old stuff. And here's the stuff I did. And I don't judge you, and I love you, and I love you even more now because you're so real and so vulnerable." That changed that guy's life. He broke up with that woman he'd been dating. 6 months later, he said he was dating a new woman, a therapist, who treated him like gold, who thought he was amazing. And he said, "I don't pack around that shame anymore." So even just that one experience transformed his life in such a powerful way.